Hey everybody, welcome back. Well, I am going to be talking a little bit about being dry drunk. We're going to define that a little bit and we're going to kind of dig into what that means because I've noticed in my own recovery sometimes that I can get a little crabby and sometimes that crabbiness gets prolonged and it ends up being like a session, a crabby session. And after a while I begin to think, "Oh, what's going on here? Like I'm sober, I have a family, I have a good support system. What am I not working through that needs to be addressed?" And a lot of the times, our emotional and psychological issues are going to contribute to what we put out, right? So what we put in is what we put out. And if we're always putting in, negativity, you're no good, you're not worth it, you're not loved, you're not trusted, that sort of thing, then sometimes that's what we exemplify, right? That's what we put out and exhibit. But a dry drunk is someone who has stopped drinking alcohol but has not addressed the emotional and psychological issues that contributed to their addiction. So, this term, often referred to as a dry drunk syndrome, it indicates that while these individuals may be sober, they still exhibit some of the behaviors and traits associated with their previous alcohol or drug use. And that, honestly, you guys, can be a huge risk for relapse. And that's what made me want to talk a little bit about being dry or dry drunk and what the syndrome is all about, because WebMD does a really good job of explaining it. And I kind of read up a little bit about it, but what I want to do is just share some of this with you because, sobriety, recovery can be a long, ongoing process. And without the help and support and treatment that makes it quite a bit easier, we might be just peeing in the wind, right? So, what causes a dry drunk syndrome? You see, sobriety is different than recovery. Being a dry drunk is also referred to as like white knuckling it. Okay, so if you're not drinking but you're still on the edge or you're still craving alcohol but not getting the treatment, you may experience this. But you may still struggle with emotional and psychological issues that will lead you to drink if not dealt with. So that's why I'll talk a lot about recovery, therapy, counseling, and having some of these issues get addressed, because this is what causes us to be in a dry drunk situation. So if you're in sobriety but not really in recovery, you may be at risk for developing or obtaining another addiction to something else. And so we really got to deal with it. So there's some underlying issues that maybe substitute one addiction for the other, but being a dry drunk also means being a part of post-acute withdrawal syndrome, PAWS, okay, which is when the withdrawal symptoms last a little bit longer than expected. And this is also known as protracted or prolonged withdrawal. But some of the people that I see having this dry drunk syndrome or whatever are people that have been in recovery for seemingly a long time. I guess I don't really know what people do behind their closed doors at night, but they're telling me that they're sober and they're in a program, so I'm assuming that they're sober. But being a dry drunk means that we're kind of being, it's a destructive habit for our mental health and for our recovery, and it is directly contributed to how we used to be while we were in addiction. So if we want to change and we don't want to be the same old person that we were in addiction and we want to be something different in recovery, we got to address this. So there's no reason to get sober and to be in recovery and do all these things if you're just going to exhibit and be the same old person that we once were. So along with treatment, therapy, working a system, a program, having a support system, having a sponsor, all that stuff. That's basically developing healthy habits for our life so that we can not end up being like this, right? So some of the things or symptoms that we see in the dry drunk syndrome, the DDS, is wanting to be the center of attention, right? Or always feeling like you're a victim, or having trouble communicating with other people, mood swings that range from depression to extreme happiness. So we all kind of know somebody that is sometimes super, super nice and all on point and da-da-da-da-da and all that. And then they'll go from a mood swing and they'll go back down to being mean or depressed, and that sort of thing we recognize in people. So mood swings and the fear that they can't change, or anger and resentment towards family and friends who intervened in your drinking, right? Frustration over time wasted due to your alcohol abuse, or believing that sobriety is boring, or romanticizing past substance or drinking. Not acknowledging the problems that your substance abuse has caused, and also feeling jealous of people who are showing signs of a healthy recovery. And that's a big one too. I'm going to go through a few of these, but there's only a couple more. So believing you always know what's best and refusing to accept constructive criticism. So there's there's a couple on here I want to highlight, right? Wanting to be the center of attention. We all know that one person that has to be the loudest in the room, has to be this, has to be that, because they're wanting everything to be on them. If there's a moment of silence, they got to say something because the attention and the focus needs to be on them. So that's a way of looking at it, and feeling jealous of people who are showing signs of a healthy recovery. So we all know that other somebody that might be, jealous or mad or upset that you're working a good program and it's working for you, but it might not be working for them. But we all get out what we put in, right? We all get out what we put in. Yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery. We got to work it out on today. And that's when we start to acknowledge or recognize that, wow, we do have the answers to make today a great day. But sometimes we have to put ourselves aside and put some of these other things aside and work on it. We got to work on our recovery, right? So sobriety and recovery are two totally different things. You can be sober and not in recovery, and that sort of thing. So, and believing that sobriety is boring, that's another one that I think people have a hard time with. And also refusing to accept constructive criticism. So that's another thing. So if we are unable to accept feedback or input or views or beliefs or points from other people, and it's just all us all the time, that's going to be really destructive for our syndrome or our recovery or whatever it is. Because I know a lot of people might not realize that they're suffering from the dry drunk syndrome. So that's why I'm trying to help us get more awareness to this. And a better understanding is going to help us change our lifestyle, our behaviors, our preset conditions and ways that we need to change, because we are different people now, right? So people drink and use drugs for many reasons. We got trauma, social conditioning, genetic predisposition, the inability to cope with circumstances, and negative beliefs about yourself or your life. And so some of the first steps that we have in dealing with anything involving addiction or problems or bad ways, patterns, behaviors, is recognizing it, right? Admitting that you have a problem and that your life had become unmanageable as a result of that. So once we do that, we can start to look outside ourselves and outside the admission and the guilt, and start to get help and support from that, because we're not going to be carrying that shame, blame, and guilt forever. It's just the initial admittance that you have a problem and that there's something that we can do about it. And that's when we turn to perhaps maybe a support group, or a group like Alcoholics Anonymous or NA, or a 12-step program. So connecting with other sober people who are in recovery and establishing healthy routines is so good. So good. So finding our purpose, aka finding our purpose, right? So start to volunteer for causes that you believe in. Maybe start a new business. Maybe try new spiritual activities or holistic healing. Reach out to people you've lost in touch with because of your alcohol use or your drug use, right? Find creative ways of expressing yourself through music, through art, through hobbies. And continue to educate yourself or get the training you need to maybe change careers, kind of like what I'm in the middle of doing right now. I don't want to work construction anymore. I'd really like to get into the field of helping people. And so I'm trying to understand some of the things that I have been going through more and more in my recovery, so I can be a better employee at some point, right? So some of the things that we need to look at when we're looking at this, and I'll let you go after this, but we need to understand some of these things that we have in our life. So be on the lookout for mood swings, anxiety, guilt, sadness, insomnia, or constant restlessness, no interest in everyday activities, changes in your appetite, tiredness, thoughts of suicide, going over the same thoughts over and over. And that's what we call ruminating, right? When we ruminate, we're going over the same thing. We're just mulling it over and over and over. And that, my friends, is almost the definition of insanity, because if we look in the Webster Dictionary of the words, right, we see the definition for insanity, and it says doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. That, my friends, is the definition of insanity. So if you're doing something over and over and over and you're expecting it to give you a different result and it doesn't, well, that's probably what we're practicing, which is a little bit of insanity there. So some of the things that we can do to change or help our dry drunk syndrome, if we have that, we can go through cognitive behavior therapy. We can go through dialectical behavior therapy, which I do. You can do motivational. You can go through motivational training. You can get into mutual support groups where people who have these disorders or symptoms, right, and have a support system that is consistently helping you manage or provide incentives and goals and aspirations for positive behavior. So if you're hanging around the wrong people, you're going to get the wrong results. What you put in is what you put out. Who you surround yourself with is probably what you're going to end up being yourself. So surround yourself with positive, loving, caring, generous, genuine, kind, loving, sober, like-minded, and hardworking, and whatever you feel drawn to in somebody. Make sure you make a list of that and find out what you like in people and what people like in you, and then that way we can exhibit those things and be a part of the team, be a part of the system that helps people stay sober. All right. So that's our talk on the drug syndrome. I know it's probably not what everybody is looking for today in a message, but I thought that I would cover this because I had noticed that a few people in my life exhibited some of these. And I was like, man, there's got to be something to that because this person is always negative. Like there's nothing, and the harder you try to please these people or let them know that you're somebody who is like, on their side, it seems like the worse it gets. So it's like the more you kind of try to do good, the more they retreat and do bad to you. And so as soon as you stop trying, it seems like that's when they come around. So it's like an ebb and flow with these people who have this or exhibit this behavior. But I want them to realize that it's not something that we have to live with forever. We don't have to be negative Nancy's all day, every day. I mean, for crying out loud, if you're living life in recovery and you're abstinent from the people, places, and things like drugs and alcohol, then your life is seemingly better than it was before. So why is there all this negativity constantly? It's just regurgitated over and over. And every time you try to make a nice or a right move by these people, it just doesn't work because they're so negative. So maybe that raises a few inquiries for you, and maybe you want to look into that a little bit more. But I appreciate you guys listening today, and I'll edit this and I'll get it out. So have a good day. See you guys.